As soon as I opened the front door to our apartment, I was hit by that sickly sweet stench. At the same moment, a loud, shrill laugh rang out from the kitchen. I grimaced in annoyance. My wife's friend had actually shown up, just like she promised. She'd spent a whole month traveling around Japan, got back this morning, and rushed straight over to her best friend to share her stories. Like a phone call wasn't good enough. "Hey, how was work?" My wife, Lena, waddled into the hallway with a funny duck-like gait, one hand supporting her huge belly. Only 2 months left until our son was due. We'd already named him, James, after my grandfather. "Hey." I leaned down and gave her a peck on her plump, rosy cheek. "Everything's fine. How about you?" I deliberately glanced toward the kitchen and wrinkled my nose. That's where the overwhelming cloud of perfume was coming from. Lena's friend, Jean, seemed to bathe in the stuff by the liter. I'd hated her since school. She'd tormented me from first grade all the way to graduation. "I did warn you Jean was coming over," Lena said reproachfully. "We haven't seen each other for a month and a half. We missed each other." I was hoping she'd be gone by the time I got home. "Damn, should have stayed late at work," I muttered, setting my shoes down next to a pair of platform heels. Left her hooves right there, that big mare. I straightened up and forced a sickly sweet smile onto my face as Jean slithered into the hallway in a way too short dress. "Hello, Alex," she purred, wiggling her fingers at me. "How are you?" Only Jean called me by that stupid nickname she'd given me ages ago. "Yeah, hey," I said distractedly, sidestepping toward the bathroom. I held my breath to avoid inhaling the poisonous cloud emanating from my wife's friend. "And where are you running off to?" Jean asked, a smirk in her voice. "Don't you want to hear about Japan? It's an amazing country." I went to Disneyland in Tokyo, and the Imperial Palace Garden, and the Aokigahara Forest. So fascinating. "I'll listen another time," I mumbled quickly, grabbing the bathroom doorknob. I was about to lock myself in when her fingers clamped down on my wrist. Hard. Jean was suddenly way too close, enveloping me in that wild fruit cocktail. I nearly choked. "Why do you have to be such a bore?" she said, tugging me insistently toward the kitchen. "We haven't seen each other in ages. I want to chat. Come on." "Fine. Just let me wash my hands." I gave in fast. Arguing with that stubborn woman was more trouble than it was worth. She'd scream bloody murder, Lena would get upset, and I'd be the one dealing with it. Better to grit my teeth and endure her for a bit. "Where's Pete?" I asked about my younger brother, reluctantly following the women into the kitchen. "He's glued to the computer again," Lena said with an annoyed wave of her hand. "Look what Jean brought me." She pointed to the kitchen counter. A big, square black box stood there, carved with an intricate design. Golden clouds decorated the sides, and on the lid was a red sun with 2 cranes flying toward it. "What is it?" I asked uncertainly, looking from the box to my wife. "It's a Japanese happiness box," Jean answered proudly. "It's supposed to bring money, health, and beautiful children into your home." "Ah, great. Thanks." I managed to endure half an hour of Jean's non-stop chatter and grating laughter. Then I excused myself, saying I was too tired from work and needed to lie down. She didn't want to let me go, begged me to stay a little longer, but I finally escaped, practically kicking the bedroom door open. Alas, there was no peace there either. My computer was still occupied by Pete, who was blasting through a shooter with my headphones on. Pete is 7 years younger than me. He finished school 4 years ago, but didn't want to study or work. Eventually, my parents' patience ran out. They had a huge fight, and Pete stormed out. He asked to stay with Lena and me just a little while, until he found a job and a place of his own. Of course I agreed. Couldn't throw my own brother out on the street. We had a big apartment, plenty of room. Only that little while stretched into a year. A very long, hard year. Lena adores my brother about as much as I adore her friend. They bicker almost daily, because wherever Pete goes, he leaves a trail of trash. And that drives my cleanliness-obsessed wife up the wall. Since Lena got pregnant, the fights have gotten worse. I try to stay neutral. I don't want to fight with my wife, but I don't want to lose my brother either. With the baby on the way, though, I've been hinting more and more that Pete needs to move out. "You're goofing off again?" I said, yanking the headphones off him. He jumped in his chair, eyes wide like a startled lemur. "What the hell, man? You scared me," he yelped, pausing the game. "Did you look for a job today?" I asked, crouching beside the big rabbit cage. Lena's beloved white rabbit, Fluffy, was peacefully chewing on a cabbage leaf, her back legs stretched out. Pete, for some reason, couldn't stand her and used to joke about turning her into stew when nobody was home. "I'll find a job, okay? Quit starting again," he snapped back, pulling the headphones over his head and muttering under his breath. "You're all just nagging me constantly. No peace." I sighed heavily, mentally giving up on him. I didn't feel like fighting, though my hand itched to smack the back of his head. Sometimes I thought Pete was stuck in adolescence forever. Soon after, Jean finally left, much to my relief, and Pete and I went back to the kitchen to finish the leftover dinner. At the table, my wife and brother managed to get into another argument. Pete wanted to examine the box more closely, and Lena snatched it out of his hands. Before bed, Lena put the box on the dresser and carefully stored all her rings, earrings, and other trinkets inside it. When she opened it, I got another whiff of that unpleasant sweet perfume. Apparently, Jean had sprayed the inside too. The next day, I came home 2 hours early. Our Friday workday was shortened. No one met me at the door. Instead, the TV was blaring in the living room. Lena and Pete were still giving each other the silent treatment, judging by their sour faces and how far apart they sat on the couch. Lena was holding a drowsy Fluffy on her lap, and Pete was hugging a huge, stinky bucket of popcorn. And instead of watching something nice, they'd put on some horror movie with a scary nun. Arguing with Lena about whether she should be watching horrors while pregnant was pointless. It was her favorite genre, and in that regard, she and Pete were perfectly aligned. As soon as the movie ended, Lena went to bed. I sat down at the computer before my brother could, determined to enjoy some gaming on my legitimate weekend. I played late into the night, shooting mutants in a radioactive wasteland. When I noticed it was past 1 in the morning, I told myself enough was enough. I put down the headphones, stretched with a wide yawn, and rolled back from the desk in my chair. The wheels squeaked softly on the carpet, and beneath that sound, I caught something else. Faint clicking noises. I went still, straining to hear. I leaned toward the rabbit cage. Fluffy was fast asleep. After a pause, the sound came again, louder this time, followed by a barely audible, drawn-out moan. "Lena?" I whipped my head toward our bed, heart jumping with alarm. My wife was sleeping peacefully on her back, the blanket rising and falling with her deep breaths. I exhaled in relief. I'd been afraid something was wrong with her. Then another click. This time from the dresser. I slowly turned my head. The Japanese box, clearly visible in the glow of the monitor, was open. From inside, a face was looking out. A face as white as fresh snow. Long, dark hair spread messily around the box. The eyes were wide open, staring right at me, their irises pitch black. The head was halfway out, like a hooligan peeking over a fence. I don't know how long I sat frozen in the chair before I jumped up. It felt like boiling water had been poured over me from head to toe. I blinked, and the head was gone. The box was closed, as if nothing had happened. I stood there, hesitating, for what felt like an eternity. I didn't want to go near the box, but I needed to convince myself it had been a trick of the eye. Visual hallucinations happen when you're overtired, right? Because no real person could fit into a box that was only 8 inches square. Finally, I grabbed a box cutter from the desk drawer and crept sideways toward the dresser. The box sat exactly where Lena had left it. I stared at its designs for a full minute, biting my lip with nerves. Then I slowly raised my hand and knocked twice on the lid. God, I'm an idiot, I thought. Of course there's nothing inside, but why am I so scared? Taking a deep breath, I flipped the lid open in one quick motion. Inside lay Lena's jewelry, untouched. I laughed quietly at my own foolish fear. I must have imagined it. Stupid horror movies. Now it was time to sleep, or I'd end up having nightmares. On Saturday morning, I was yanked from sleep by a piercing scream. I sat up in bed, disoriented. Light filtered through the gap in the curtains. The clock on the wall read 9 a.m. "What's happening?" I said, still half asleep. Lena was on her knees in front of the rabbit cage, sobbing. I scrambled out of bed and rushed to her. "What's wrong? Do you need an ambulance?" "No." With a trembling hand, she pointed at the cage. "Fluffy. My Fluffy, she's dead." A chill ran through me. I forced myself to look. The rabbit lay on her back, motionless. Her eyes bulged. Her mouth hung open, and her neck was twisted at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. "Oh my God," I muttered, staring at the glazed red eyes. "How? Who?" "You have to ask?" Lena's voice cracked with fury. She punched my leg. "Who threatened to kill her? Who said he'd make a collar out of her fur and grind her meat for burgers? Who else?" Indeed, of the three of us, who else had a motive to snap Fluffy's neck? But Pete, my own brother. I thought I knew him. Maybe I didn't know him as well as I believed. "What are you two yelling about so early?" Pete appeared in the doorway without knocking, wearing only shorts, his hair a mess, pillow creases still on his face. Lena straightened up, leaning on the cage, and fixed him with a glare I'd never seen before. Her face was twisted with rage, her teeth bared like a chained dog. She was shaking. Pete glanced at her, then at the rabbit's body, and made a terrible mistake. He chuckled. "Oh, the flop-eared one kicked the bucket." With a shriek of pure fury, Lena lunged at him, going for his eyes. I caught her and held her tight, more worried about her than about my idiot brother. Her face was already red. Her blood pressure must have spiked. While she tried to break free, screaming obscenities at Pete and accusing him of killing her beloved pet, Pete finally snapped out of it. "What the hell? I never even touched her," he yelled. "But honestly, good riddance. I've wanted to wring her neck for ages." That was it. My last shred of patience evaporated. "Enough!" I roared at my brother, and he flinched. I rarely raised my voice. I pointed to the front door. "Get out of here. I don't want to see your face in my house again." "You can both go to hell," Pete screamed back. You and your fat cow of a wife. I hate you." As I tried to calm Lena, who was now sobbing hysterically, I heard Pete stomping around his room, throwing on clothes and cursing us. I should have grown a spine long ago and kicked him out. Maybe then none of this would have happened. Pete stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled, shouting one last obscenity behind him. I spent nearly an hour plying Lena with sedatives and offered to call an ambulance several times, but she refused. Once she fell asleep, I gently removed the rabbit's body, put it in a shoebox, and went to the river to bury it deep so stray dogs wouldn't dig it up. The rest of the day was a funeral. I barely managed to get Lena to eat, insisting it was important for the baby. The next day, I dragged my shattered wife to the park, then to a children's movie. She needed to get out, to recover. She couldn't let her grief affect little James. That evening, I called my boss, explained the situation, and took a few days off. Leaving Lena alone in her state was too risky. In the middle of the night, I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. I had no idea what woke me. I lifted my head and glanced at Lena. She was sleeping peacefully on her side, her cheek resting on her hands. Automatically, my eyes went to the empty rabbit cage. I cursed under my breath. I should have taken the cage apart during the day, so it wouldn't be such a sad reminder. From the left side of the room, where the dresser stood, came 3 clicks. An ice-cold wave swept over me from the top of my head down. I recognized those sounds. I'd heard them before. Slowly, I shifted my gaze to the dresser. Even in the darkness, I could clearly see that the damned box was open. From inside, thin black twigs were rustling out. No, not twigs. Long black hair. It spilled around the box and draped over the dresser. Then came a white, high forehead and 2 huge, mad eyes that quickly scanned the room and locked onto me. Again the clicking, faster this time, and the head pushed farther out. A narrow, snub nose, dark, pursed lips, a thin neck. With a crackle of breaking bones, the head tilted to the side. The mouth opened, releasing a strangled wheeze and more clicking. Long, slender fingers stretched out of the box, touched the pale chin, hooked onto the edge. With my heart pounding at a frantic rhythm, I watched something climb out of that Japanese box. I was drenched in sweat. Inside, I was screaming, my eyes bulging, but I couldn't move. Not a single muscle obeyed my brain's frantic orders to get up. A prisoner of my own terror, I was forced to watch as this horrifying woman entered our room in the most impossible way. Having extracted herself up to her waist, she leaned on her bony white hands and twisted her head with a dreadful crunch. Her hair fell in tangled strings over a dirty gray nightgown. Then she lunged forward, pulling herself completely out of the box and crashing onto the floor with a thud. I gasped, then held my breath. Where was she? Was she lying on the floor, or had she vanished? I heard a faint rustling. Something was crawling across the floor. White, bony fingers appeared at the foot of the bed, almost glowing in the dark. Then the horrifying face rose into view, its mouth a black pit. Her head twitched with a grinding noise, as if her neck vertebrae were shattered. and the monster crawled up onto the bed, her limbs splayed awkwardly. I felt the mattress sink under her weight, her heavy hand pressing down on my leg. The cold was replaced by unbearable heat. I was burning from the inside out, paralyzed, unable to even squeak. Her face stopped at the level of my chest. Her head turned toward Lena with a sharp crack. The shrill ring of the doorbell snapped me out of the trance. I sucked in air and sat bolt upright. No hideous woman on the bed. No one in the room at all. The box was tightly closed. Lena stirred under the blanket with a displeased groan as the bell rang a second time. It was just a nightmare, I told myself. A vivid one. Sleep paralysis, that's all. There's no way any of that was real. Who the hell is that? Lena grumbled, sitting up. Alex, go see. Yeah, I'm going. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and stumbled to the hallway. After that nightmare, I was even scared to look through the peephole, but it was just my brother, dead drunk. How he'd made it home in that condition was a mystery. I couldn't leave him outside. Neighbors would see. I opened the door and Pete literally collapsed onto me. I grabbed him under the arms and hauled my beloved, sarcasm intended, brother to his room. He was still mumbling something. Lena came into the hallway to see the spectacle. Mercifully, she didn't comment, just shook her head. After dumping him on the couch, I went back to bed, but not before taking a generous dose of sedatives. I was still shaking from the nightmare. The meds probably knocked me out until noon. Lena had already made breakfast and managed to argue with Pete twice. He didn't say anything about his 2-day bender, and when she demanded to know why he'd killed Fluffy, he snarled back that he hadn't done it. The bastard didn't even have the decency to admit what he'd done. In my eyes, he'd fallen completely. All right, I said, walking into the room after breakfast. Pete gave me a sideways scowl from the computer desk. I'm giving you 1 week to find another place. I'm done putting up with your crap. Killing Fluffy was the last straw. He started to argue, but I cut him off. No more free ride, Pete. Time to be an adult. I don't care if you find an apartment in a week or not. I promise you, I'll throw you out myself. Understood? I didn't hear his reply, just a snarl through his teeth. If he thought I was joking or would soften when the week was up, he was dead wrong. I'd made up my mind to kick my arrogant younger brother out. Lena and I spent most of the day in the park, then at her favorite cafe, then by the river. She carefully asked where I'd buried the rabbit, but I refused to take her to the grave. She'd just start crying again. We came home in the evening. Pete had gone out, but judging by his stuff, he'd be back. I went to the kitchen to heat up some food while Lena, tired from the long walk, said she wanted to lie down for a bit. A moment later, I heard her call me, her voice strange. "What is this?" she asked, pointing at our bed. At first, I didn't understand what was bothering her. I stepped closer, and then it hit me, like an electric shock. On the light-colored sheets lay a clump of long black hair, exactly like the hair I'd seen. No, that had been a nightmare. It couldn't be real. What the hell is this? Lena picked up the tangled strands with 2 fingers, disgusted. That creep's been sneaking women in while we're out, and they've been rolling around on our bed. Alex, this is beyond the pale. I shook my head in frustration. It was a plausible explanation, and it fit Pete. He must have sensed he was in for a harsh talk, because he didn't show up. He didn't answer his phone, only texted that he was staying at a friend's place overnight. Fine by us. Lena demanded I get rid of the sheets. I stuffed them into a trash bag. As I did, I glanced at the cursed box. You know what? I really don't like this thing. It smells bad. Maybe we should throw it out too? Lena put her hands on her hips. I know you can't stand Genie, but it's a gift, Alex. An expensive one from Japan. We're not throwing it away. All right, calm down. Just try to ignore it. Again, I woke up in the middle of the night. Still half asleep, I heard a muffled groan from Lena. I opened my eyes, blinking. First thing I saw, Lena lying on her back, her head moving restlessly, hair plastered to her sweaty forehead. I blinked again and pushed myself up. A pale woman in a dirty nightgown was sitting on Lena's legs. Her hair hung over her face, barely hiding the mad eyes and twisted mouth. Her palms, fingers splayed, rested on Lena's belly. They stroked it. Then they sank deeper, through the blanket, all the way to the wrists. The monster's mouth opened wide, and a screeching hiss filled the room. Lena's eyes flew open, and she screamed. The paralysis broke. I leaped out of bed, knocking the blanket to the floor. The terrible woman had already vanished. Only the lid of the box clicked shut. Lena's nightgown was intact, no holes or marks, but the fresh sheet between her legs was soaked with blood. The ambulance came quickly. The paramedics and later the doctors said everything would be okay. Yes, premature labor. Yes, placental abruption, something they hadn't diagnosed earlier, but the baby was big enough, viable. Soon after Lena was taken into the operating room, both our parents arrived. They all tried to reassure me, saying everything would be fine. Babies had survived at this stage, and that today I would become a father. I didn't. James didn't make it. He suffocated. The doctors couldn't revive him. I don't know how long I sat in the waiting room, numbed by the news. I vaguely heard that Lena was in critical condition. She'd lost a lot of blood. Someone suggested I go home and sleep. They wouldn't let me into the ICU anyway. How could I leave her? Time dissolved. Hours or days, I couldn't tell. At some point, my parents guided me outside, put me in the car, and drove me back to the apartment. I only came back to myself when I crossed the threshold. Pete awkwardly hugged me and mumbled some words of support. I didn't remember them. My father left later, but my mother stayed to take care of us. She fed my brother and me. I didn't notice what. I felt like I was still asleep in that waiting room, moving through a constant haze. I didn't want to do anything. I just sat in front of the TV and watched nothing. Pete kept coming to ask if I needed anything. What I needed was to wake up and find Lena and James safe. A sharp sound pulled me out of the fog. I realized the TV remote had slipped from my hand and hit the floor. The living room was dark. Some action movie was playing. I grabbed my phone from the couch and turned on the screen. 1:30 in the morning. My mouth was bone dry, and despite my exhaustion, I had to get water. I got up heavily, moving like I'd aged decades. Shuffling down the hallway, I noticed my bedroom door was slightly ajar. Light from the computer monitor flickered through the gap. Pete in his usual element. I heard strange sounds from the room. Was he playing without speakers? I grabbed the round handle and pushed the door open. Pete lay on his back, arms out, eyes staring at the ceiling. His mouth was stretched wide, tongue lolling to the side. On his chest sat the pale creature with the black hair. Its fingers were clamped around his throat. Its head snapped back with a crack, hair falling away from its face, and its gaze fixed on me. Its dark lips stretched into a long smile. I screamed at the top of my lungs. After that, everything became a blur. I barely remember calling the ambulance. I don't recall when they arrived or when the police showed up. I was questioned, gave answers that didn't make sense. Eventually, they released me, saying the marks on Pete's neck didn't match my fingerprints. I found out I'd been in custody for 4 days. I got out just in time for my brother's funeral, which also passed in a haze. I remember my mother sobbing, my father telling me to hold on. I remember my crying grandfather's embrace, friends offering comfort. I remember a phone call from Lena in the hospital, and I remember Jeannie sobbing against my chest. The damned box. I'd forgotten about it entirely in all the chaos with Lena. If I had gone straight home and thrown it out, if I had burned it, my brother would still be alive. I found myself in my bedroom, standing in front of the dresser. The box was there like a pretty decorative piece, still holding Lena's jewelry. I grabbed it, dumping the jewelry out without care. Some pieces clattered to the floor, but I didn't care. "What are you doing?" I flinched at my mother's voice. I hadn't realized she was still here. "This thing," I growled, glaring at the Japanese box in my hands. "Jean's present." "Alex?" Mom stood in the doorway, blocking my way. "Don't do anything stupid. First Lena, then Pete. Don't you dare." "Don't worry." I kissed her pale cheek. "I'll be back in an hour." Jean lived 2 bus stops away. I texted her that I needed to talk, and she eagerly agreed. Even though she'd been crying rivers just that morning, she greeted me looking fresh, made up, and wearing a short leopard print robe. "Alex, I'm so sorry," she gushed with an inappropriate smile, trying to hug me. I stepped back, gripping my bag strap. Unfazed, she gestured me inside. "Come in, I have cognac. You need to relax." "Thanks, I won't stay long." I went into the living room, sat on the couch, and glanced at the bottle on the table. Jean sat close beside me, crossing her legs so her robe rode up. "I have a strange question. Where did you get that box? The one with the cranes that you gave to Lena?" Her expression changed. Panic flickered in her eyes. She licked her painted lips, shifted, and grabbed my hand, words tumbling out fast and agitated. "I did it for you. I brought that box from the cursed forest because of you. I love you, Alex. I've loved you since 1st grade, from the first moment I saw you. But you chose that cow, Lena. She was never right for you. She tried to trap you with the baby, but it didn't work. I'm so sorry, Alex. Your brother wasn't supposed to die. It was an accident. She just didn't understand who was in your way. She was supposed to get rid of Lena and her baby." My fist swung up on its own. It connected with Jean's jutting chin. Her jaw clacked, and she crumpled to the floor, unconscious. I stepped over her, went into the next room, and unzipped my bag. I knelt beside her wide bed, leaned down to the floor, and shoved the Japanese box far underneath, deep against the wall. I smiled as I heard the lid creak open and that familiar clicking sound. "Sweet dreams, Jean."